Well, thank you all of everyone for sticking back with us. We're really happy to have Laura Isenor with us today from the Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services Educational Law Advocacy Project. But I know that Laura will do a little bit more discussion about her experience and introduce herself a little bit more fully. So thank you, Laura, for being with us.
Sure, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So yes, my name is Laura Eisner, and you can call me whatever because I'm married into the name, and honestly, all of my husband's cousins pronounce their last name differently, so we will go by whatever you want to call me. I am an attorney. I work with the Education Law Advocacy Project. I have been an attorney now for 11 years. I was a prosecutor doing juvenile delinquency, child protection, some misdemeanors, other things for 10 years. And I did a lot of work with truancy court, trying to make it so that kids didn't go to court as often. I did a lot of diversion program development, and I was actually part of a team at my last office where we were trying to reduce arrests in school buildings for high school students by connecting them with immediate services for mental health and chemical dependency. Since I had a life event, which I'll talk about in a second here, and I switched over to the Education Law Advocacy Project, which has been honestly the best change in my last year. I really am happy with this role, and I'm learning so much. I had a baby very early. He was born at 22 weeks, so we had a over 500-day hospital stay, and I couldn't do jury trials at home. I had to have a job that was better fitting for my role as a mom, and he also has a lot of medical issues, and we will see where he goes in his life path. But I needed to know IEPs, and so that is why when this job came open, I was like, this is just a perfect fit for me in my time of life. And so anyway, so here I am and learning about IEPs and trying to improve my work. I didn't realize there was so much to it. My daughter has had an IEP for quite some time. She has a speech and language IEP because she can't say the S blend. She really struggles with the S on the S blends. And so we've had an IEP for quite some time, and I didn't realize all the stuff I didn't know. So I'm so happy to be here so I can work with families and parents and help you become better advocates for your children. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint just to keep me on track. If there's questions that come up, you can put them in the chat just to make sure we can address them. I don't know if I'll be able to see the chat as we go along. So if it is easier to take a moment, I'm happy to be interrupted and address questions. Otherwise, at the end, we can stop the recording and go through questions then too when it's not a documented question out in front of everybody. So I'm happy to do both. So I'm going to share my screen here. You might see my desktop. Don't judge me. There's a process to my madness. And if I don't save everything on my desktop, I can't get it into the electronic file. So just there's a reason for all of this here. So just 1 second. Let me get on my PowerPoint, and we can get going.
And Laura, I'll be monitoring, well, Carolyn and I will be monitoring chat, so we'll be sure to read stuff to you. Don't feel like you need to watch it.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Oh, wait.
So
it changed. Nope. That's right. Sorry. You're back.
Does it look okay?
Yeah, sorry.
All right, great. Okay. So we're going to talk about parent advocacy in the school setting. I'm specifically focusing on students with disabilities and how to work through IEPs 504. I have little plugs in here about bullying. I try to include tips. There's a lot more that we can do. And so I included some of that in the like investigative reports and other options down at the end of the slides, but we'll go through all of this. We'll figure out where our conversation takes us, and I'm happy to address whatever comes up today here. So anyways, this is our contact information. I'm with the Educational Advocacy Project. I'm part of SMERLS as a general firm, so that's Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services. And this is our service area. You can see that on the map here. Families that typically we represent fall within either they attend school or live in the service area, and then they're considered to be low income. That doesn't mean that I don't do case consults. I've case consulted with Jamie. I've case consulted with a family or two that she sent with me just to help people kind of come up with ideas on how to plan their steps forward. So that's something that I'm happy to do for your group. If you want to reach out, you can keep my contact information and send me emails as things come up. So the Educational Advocacy Project started back in 1995. Our approach for representation is to represent families. We don't just give advice. If you're in our area and you qualify, you can get an attorney to represent you in the school. We want to ensure that students receive the services that they need, they empower and support families, and that we build long-term relationships between the families and the schools if they're going to remain in that building, just so that they can have a good communication path going forward. And now I know school relationships will probably come up. I cannot build a relationship. A relationship is two people or two groups. But we can at least try to have the structure so that there's at least communication paths, I guess, set up between the family and the school. Why ELAP is here is we were designed with the purpose of closing the achievement gap. Minnesota has been ranked, it was reported, 50 out of 50 states for the achievement gap. And so basically students that are at high risk with disabilities, facing discrimination in the school, if they're homeless in foster care, are falling behind their counterparts in the school building. And they're just, whether they're not attending school, they're failing out, they're not getting the services that they need, they're not being as successful as their peers that don't have these difficulties or diagnoses, have homes, things like that. So okay, so this is the things that we typically help with. And the reason that I'm bringing this up today is so you know, if you do have questions in the future or you want to talk about it today, this is the stuff that we'll deal with. Really, though, just know we cover anything if it's in the building or getting to the building. We don't ever go against other kids. So sometimes we have families wanting us to like get HROs against other children. We don't do that. Our opposing counsel is always the school attorney, right? So it's always that group. So whether it's academic performance, helping students with disability, transportation issues, maltreatment in the school, harassment or bullying, the systemic discrimination issues that can be tied to bullying or impacting how discipline's occurring, challenging curriculum is not being offered to certain students. We help with school discipline or truancy issues, and then English learner instruction is something else that we can navigate. And so if you do qualify, or if you want to see if you qualify, you can always go through our intake process. Or you can just call me and I can do an intake interview at the same time, and that will save you a phone call. But you can go through our intake process if you want. And then that is a method where we just see if you are in the service area, if you qualify. Once you do qualify, we get the release and see what the family's objectives are. And then from there, we can work with the school, whether it's negotiating IEPs, mediating, or filing complaints, attending court, things like that. Okay, so today we're going to cover a couple different things. We're going to talk about the basics of IDEA, and I want to make sure that you have, IDEA is complex, right, for the IEPs, but we are going to cover that and make sure that you understand that. We're going to talk about IFSPs briefly and just compare that to an IEP. We're going to compare 504 plans with IEPs. I want you to know what the IEP process looks like. There's a crucial thing that's basically like a parent's best friend is called a PWN, or prior written notice. And that is how to identify what a PWN can look like, how to object to a PWN, how to make those changes if you need to for your IEP or whatever is occurring within the PWN. I want to highlight the obtainable goals and data collection, and then we're going to talk about requesting data, requesting progress notes, and making sure parent communication is inserted into your IEP, and then dispute resolution, and then other sort of options for navigating conflict within the school. Okay, so first IFSP versus an IEP. You need to go downstairs, okay, remember? Okay. You want ice cream later? Go downstairs. Sorry, everybody's home from school today. Obviously, if we're done now. An IFP is a IFSP is a family service plan for children birth to 3. So this is something that you would work with your school district for early intervention services. This can be written, well, it should be a plan, and it should include a comprehensive plan similar to what an IEP has, but it has targets such as looking at the vision, hearing, gross motor, fine motor, self-help skills, communication, etc., compared to an IEP, right? IEP would have a lot of these things, but they also kind of go into the functional aspects of the child learning, their academics, intellectual piece. So they both start with an evaluation. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second here. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No problem, Laura. Don't worry. Everybody's kids are home.
Yes, I can also relate.
I give them all ice cream too, I swear. And my mother-in-law, please go play with. Thank you for your patience. Okay, all right, let me keep going here. So, is my screen back up for the PowerPoint?
I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing Zoom.
Oh,
I did
okay.
something wrong. Did I do something wrong?
I'll just
Sorry.
share. I'll just share again. No, it's because I messed with it. I shouldn't have touched it. I'm sorry, everyone.
No worries.
There we go. Okay. Is it better now? Can you see my PowerPoint?
So for me, it's just saying Laura has started screen sharing. So I'm just waiting to see
Oh,
if it pops up. Although the audio issue is mine, so other people should feel free to pipe up if they can see it.
okay.
I
Can
am
anybody see
not
my screen?
seeing, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint.
Oh, heavens. Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. All right. It should be up now. At least it says it's up.
Yep, I
And I'm
see
sharing
it.
it. Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. So both of these start with an evaluation. The team members are, of course, different, though, just as a note. And then IEP would have the measurable goals, like I said, for academic or functional behaviors, with the IFSP has major outcomes desired for the child and family and how to measure the progress. So, for example, my little guy, who was in the hospital for so long, he has an IFSP, and our team just asked, like, what are our top 3 main goals that we want to work on for his next steps, right? And it's not like anything tied to academic achievement or any sort of like, getting a state test done. It's, do we want him to, work on feeding or walking or, that type of stuff. So it's kind of more of like the family focused versus the IEP starts to go broader, right, into like making sure that they're meeting their grade level marks. And I added a chart here so you can have the slides when I'm done. Of course, Jamie will get them out, but I think sometimes charts are nice to compare. So here, IEP versus a 504 plan. IEP, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail in a few minutes here, but the IEP is the written plan for a student. Your 504 plan should also be written, but it is it's written in a much more loose formatting, and the language is just kind of made up as you go along, depending on what the child needs. So an IEP is based under the rule of IDEA, which is a federal law, and you have to have one or more of the disabilities listed in IDEA, which we'll cover in a second here. And if they have multiple disabilities, they should all be in an IEP, just as a heads up. I have a case right now where the school is fighting us because they feel like the child already has a disability listed in an IEP, and it's like, well, she has multiple ones. We need services for all of them, not just the one that you've identified previously. So whereas a 504 plan, because it's a civil rights law, it is designed in a way that the schools can kind of mold the language to make it so that the child is supported and barriers are removed. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail as well for the 504 plan. So in IEP qualifications, here are the first group. We have 13 total. So a lot of these are, I think, ones that we regularly see, the specific learning disability, other health impairments. I've had ones where I'm working on one now with an IEP where the young gal has a shunt in her brain and it actually impacts her processing skills, right? And so that falls under the other health impairment. And then here's the last of the list, multiple disabilities, right? Like we shouldn't have to fight with the schools to have multiple disabilities on an IEP, but that's an option under IDEA if they ever do argue that with you. For a 504 plan.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. If everyone could mute their mics. I keep muting, but it's coming unmuted again. Thank you.
For a 504 plan, in order to qualify, the child must have... Should I keep going?
I think, yeah, try
good?
again.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So a 504 plan, the child must have an impairment that substantially limits their major life activity. So here, if the child has allergies, vision impairment, I saw one where the child had a broken leg and they just got some special transportation until the leg was healed. But it has to impact them in a major way: breathing, sleeping, caring for themselves, concentrating, thinking, learning. It's not an exhaustive list. Okay, so let's dive into the IEP process. I have a flow chart here to keep us on track, but I also have some notes just to go along to give you some tips along the way. But if anything is unclear, please let me know. And one thing that attorneys do that's really annoying is sometimes we'll put in acronyms because that's how we think, but really, like, it's not a common phrase. So if there's an acronym that you have a question on, please just ask it. We can make sure that everybody's on the same page as we go forward. Okay, so here's our IEP flow chart, or how things should be occurring. And we'll go through each one of these, but identification, obviously first step. And then things can happen in different pathways here. After you get an IEP in place, then you have to have that reevaluation with every 3 years, but your IEP should actually be developed every year at least. And so this is not maybe a steady path. It just kind of depends on how things go and how the school is interacting with you. Okay, first thing, so for identification, the school district must identify, locate, and evaluate all children with disabilities. And this is called child find. So this is a big issue where if a child is struggling in school, the school is maybe aware of some of the things that are going on in their life, and they refuse to evaluate them or even take that first step of identifying them and saying that this child needs help. That would be a violation of child find. And we'll go through this in a little bit here as well as we go through the list of dispute resolution options. But child find is something that the Department of Education will investigate if there are concerns that the child is showing that they have a disability, or the parents presented that they have a disability and the school is not willing to evaluate them. That can be a complaint that goes to the Department of Education for their special rights compliance group to investigate. So next step, an evaluation. So an evaluation request can come from the parent or from the school through that identification piece. The school may choose not to evaluate, and the school may choose not to evaluate even without having a meeting. So if you have a request that's in and the school's not going to schedule a meeting, they should be sending you at least something so that they're refusing to request or to start the evaluation process. And if on the flip side, it's also an option that if a school is trying to maybe push a student out, or the parent has concerns about that and they're trying to evaluate to say that their needs are too high to be in the school building, the parent can object to an evaluation. They don't have to do an evaluation just because the child's been identified. The school must send a prior written notice to the parent with the proposal of whatever they're saying, evaluate or not evaluate, and it must be sent to them. So an evaluation must be completed within 30 school days after the school receives permission to do the evaluation. Now, the PWN would be permission to, like, and we'll go through it. I have an example document in here, but the PWN would be consent to start that evaluation, and it needs to go to the schools to start it on an initial evaluation. If it's the first evaluation, or the first if the child's been off of an IEP for a year and they're starting the evaluation process again, then it has to go in. The evaluation must be comprehensive, and it can't just be like, okay, well, we think that the child has some reading difficulties. We're going to just solely focus on reading and not look at other aspects of his life, right? They need to do a full comprehensive evaluation that covers all areas of suspected disability. So they should do an intellectual testing, as well as, if he's having behavioral responses at school, is it tied to his reading? We need to investigate that too, and put that in the evaluation. Now, just because an evaluation is done doesn't mean that an IEP or 504 plan will be developed. Okay, so what happens after you make an evaluation request? Okay, as a parent, you're going to the school, you've made an evaluation request. A couple things we need to check off first. Did you make that request in writing? It doesn't have to be. Absolutely, it can be verbal. It can be during a school conference that you've just made the request on the phone, whatever. But to save yourself any stress or headaches in the future, follow up with that phone call or that conference with it in writing, just to have it documented somewhere that you made that request. Did the school ignore you? So are we going to follow up? We need to follow up with necessary questions like, are we going to start this? What's going on? I have a parent right now in a different school district that's over in Southwest Minnesota, and she made the request. She did it 3 times. She made the request about the IEP, inquiry about the IEP. She made the request the first day she enrolled the child, and the teachers or principal or whoever, some administrative person said, we'll have to look into that, and then there was no ever any communication afterwards by the school to her about setting up a meeting, that they weren't going to do it, anything. So just follow up if it's not being done, because they might drop the ball and just not do anything. After you made the request, you'll need to attend a pre-evaluation meeting. Sometimes schools will, like I said before, they will just reject your request outright, but then they should be sending you that PWN. That's that last piece, right? If you sent a PW or received a PWN. But sometimes they'll have the meeting, which is the pre-evaluation meeting, and then they'll decide not to do it at that point. So that's kind of a couple of different things that can happen, where if they're trying to get out of it and trying not to do that evaluation, where there's different paths, but they should be communicating with you no matter what with that PWN, either agreeing to do the evaluation or refusing to do it, and why. Okay, so after you make your evaluation request and it's actually been received and you've heard back, right? They might review your request without the meeting. They might send you a PWN. They could send you a PWN agreeing to the request of the evaluation with some proposals and ideas. But if you don't have that meeting or have a conversation with them about what you want, those proposals might not be a comprehensive evaluation. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you get a document without having a meeting, you want to make sure that you absolutely agree with it, because that's what they're going to do. And they might take steps or might miss things that you don't agree with. So I would always recommend, once you get a PWN, that you ask for a meeting with the school, whether it's a PWN that they're just refusing this IEP, or a PWN where they're making up some random recommendations without talking to you fully about your concerns. Ask for that pre-evaluation meeting and discuss with the people that show up about who is doing what and what your concerns are, to make sure that everything's being covered. Here's my tip: is providing key documents ahead of time, and then also bringing copies to the meeting. So if you have a diagnostic assessment that's done by an outside person, sharing that ahead of time would be helpful, so that they know where you're coming from. But also, if you have the opportunity to print it out and bring it to the meeting, you might want to do that as well, or be prepared to email it to people in the meeting, because the school that I've dealt with often are disjointed and they don't always share information ahead of time. I'd also recommend to take notes of your conversations with the school as you make this request. If you've made the request in at the conference, then you followed up with an email, you can just write yourself a note or put it in a note doc, app on your phone or whatever, just so you remember when you did stuff so you can follow up. And then you also want to take notes about this meeting. Now, work with the school staff to identify the concerns. Like, are the concerns behavioral, sensory, academic, developmental? And you want to probably also take notes. So I'm really pushing this your own data collection, I guess, on if the staff at the school appear to agree with you or disagree with you about the concerns, because they might be showing their own bias on how they want to handle things without, you know, they might say like, well, yeah, we'll do an evaluation, but I don't really see it. It's like, well, then did you already make a decision? Like, what do we need to do here to make sure that you go at this evaluation with an open mind to capture all aspects of my child's educational life? Okay, so after there's an agreement, so you get the team to agree that there needs to be an evaluation and everyone identifies the areas of concerns that need to be done. It should be outlined as to who's doing what and specifics about how it's going to be done. So it could include specific tools. There's a behavioral assessment called the BASC-3, just an example. Or it could be like other means of collecting data on the child, right? So we're doing interviews with the teachers or interviews with parents, interviews with the student themselves, observing them. However, they're going to collect this data needs to be outlined, and who's going to do what is important. Now, my experience has been that anybody attending this pre-evaluation meeting, based on the conversation that happens, there's often like some brainstorming that kind of goes on, and sometimes like you'll have like a speech teacher talking about what they want to do, and then maybe like the school psychologist will be like, oh yeah, I want to do a test kind of related to that, but somewhat different and whatever, right? So they have this weird brainstorming session that happens, and then the conversation is so fluid that things don't always end up in your evaluation. So even or your PWN, I should say, for the evaluation. So even if they say all the things you want to hear, your note taking is going to be really important because you want to make sure what they're saying actually ends up in that document. It's more important to get an evaluation that's done right than one that's done quickly. And I say that knowing how important it is to get it done quickly because your child needs help. But if you don't get everything captured properly in that document, they could totally miss everything, and then you won't even have an evaluation you can rely on. Okay, so I added just a few slides in here so you could have the information to move forward on and just have the, have this to come back to, I guess, if you needed to. But the comprehensive evaluation should cover everything: functional, developmental. It should include information from the parents, from the students, observations. It should be comprehensive, and it should be technically sound instruments. You can't just like willy-nilly pick up what you want to do and it design like your own test for an evaluation, right? They need to have instruments that are tried and true, evaluated or peer-reviewed assessments for your child to have completed. Now, I've had some schools where they call things informal assessments. And so sometimes the parents are like, well, maybe I'll be okay with that. I don't know what it is. And then we have to ask what these or inquire what the informal assessments are. I had one IEP meeting earlier this week where the person that was showing up, she was talking about how she didn't see a need for anything at all in her involvement whatsoever. And she was really arguing to not be involved at all. And then she's like, well, I guess I can do an informal assessment. It's like, well, like, what does that mean? Because you're saying you don't even want to be involved. So if you're informal assessments, like, doesn't that already like add some like aura of, disinterest and, that you don't believe that the child has this need? So how are we going to rely on this, informal assessment if we don't really know and trust you that you think that there's even a concern to look into? So just, it's not a bad thing to ask about standardized evaluations and testing. And it's okay to maybe compare those to the informals if they want to do it all, but they should be technically sound instruments or assessments to be used. Okay, so after your pre-evaluation meeting, you go to the team, you talk about your concerns, they identify what's going to be established through this evaluation and who's doing what. You're supposed to get that PWN for review. And for the initial evaluation, you have to consent. If you do not consent If you don't sign that PWN saying, I want an evaluation, they won't do it. Once they get that PWN back, then they have 30 days to complete the evaluation. Okay, and then I added this because as I was working on these slides, I was just like, I've had a lot of parents where schools have refused their evaluation request because they're like, well, they're not attending enough for us to do anything. And that's not a reason to refuse an evaluation request. It might be difficult, your information might be hard to gather, but you cannot just say we can't do it because he's not here enough or she's not coming enough. That's not a reason. And honestly, some of the disabilities or like depression, for example, if the child's not getting out of bed because they're so depressed, they're not going to have great attendance. And we know that because that's part of their disability. And so that's even more reason to have an evaluation. So that's not a reason to refuse. Also, just as a side note, there are some schools where they say that it has to be 6 months on working with like an intervention person or really good attendance or whatever before they start. That's also not a rule. That's like an internal policy that violates IDEA. So there is no requirement on like how long the child needs to be in school before they do an IEP evaluation. I understand concerns like we don't know the child, we don't know what we're looking for, if they just started or if they're not there that option, but that's something that you have to work through with the team. Like I can get you outside evaluations, or maybe we wait a couple weeks and then we start, but I want to start the conversation now. And, we can start talking about what we need to get together, but, maybe we can wait a couple weeks while you get to know my son at the new school, right? But these are not reasons to not do the request. Okay, so this is an example from one of my cases. It's a PWN snapshot. It's just PWNs are 4 pages long, usually. This is a snapshot. We objected to this PWN, and I just want to outline a couple of reasons why. So first, down here, one of the concerns was observations. And it's going to be done by these people, school psychologist and special education teacher. One of the concerns about this PWN was the observations were like, to what end are we doing these observations? What is the special education teacher observing? Is it for academic performance, sensory status? We don't know. Like, what is this for? What is the intent and what are you hoping to get from it? Same with the school psychologist. What, like, is it for the social emotional behavioral? We don't know. And so we asked that this be rewritten into the different sections so we know, like, to what end, what area are you looking at? Because an observation is not an area. That doesn't make any sense as to what you're wanting here. Down below here at the very bottom, it has other. Oops, let me go back one. It has other, and then it has parent input / assistive technology considerations by the special education teacher. Well, and parent input about what? And so a lot of the questions were in this one was like, to what end? What is the point here that we're doing? The parent input, is it to talk about assistive technology because that's what it's grouped with, or is it parent input on her sensory status or her general needs overall? I mean, it would be nice to have this information, and what's in this document is what they're going to do, right? And so if we have concerns about it, we have to object. Okay, so then here's the form itself, like the 4th page of the PWN. It has that you have to have the PWN back, unless it's a first evaluation. They're going to just follow through with your PWN no matter what. So just to keep that in mind, your PWNs are an opportunity for you to object within 14 days. On an initial evaluation, nothing will happen, but if they're proposing, say, to change your child from a level 1 to a level 4 and they put it in a PWN, if you don't object, then that will happen within 14 days. So just these are very important documents, and it's a great way to document your communication or your concerns to the school and for them to tell you why they're doing things. They should be telling you and listing it out in the PWNs. They don't always do that. Sometimes they just say based on the IEP meeting. Well, it's like, what is that? That's not helpful for anybody. So just it should be well documented in this document for you to know what's going on. Okay, so we got the PWN. We're going to object. So down here, we just objected and said we don't agree. We're requesting a meeting with the appropriate members of our child's team. And then we list out here why we objected and what we wanted to have change. If it gets long, you can attach a letter. And if you consent to something, but you don't consent to everything, or you consent to something, but you have like a caveat, you can put notes down here too and just make it record of it. and then date and return the form, or sign date and return the form. Okay, so then we worked with the school to make the changes, right? And so then we had, this is our updated one that we consented to later. So we had classroom observations. Look at, and we added all our interviews that we wanted. All of this was then listed for what we're doing. What's the purpose of this parent interview? And classroom observation is for academic performance and who it's going to be by. The assistive technology stuff changed. Instead of, remember before it had other, so then they actually clarified here what they were doing. And we have a nice, we don't need to know the names of these people. I mean, if the school nurse quits tomorrow, it doesn't really matter. I just need to know who's going to do it. Some schools, they do list the names, but that's not, I don't think that's necessary. Unless there's multiple people with the same title, then it might be helpful just to know who to talk to and who's going to be calling you. But it would be really important to know what their role is, because if I don't want the school nurse doing something on academic performance, right, that doesn't make any sense, or similar with the teacher reviewing medical records. Okay, so also in our PW1, this is same part of that same packet that came over that we consented with. What they did is they listed on the first page what they changed based on our objection. So they went through, and this is all the stuff we had listed out that we wanted to make sure that the school had gone over. And was clear to us, because we need to understand what they're doing too. It's just not a document for them. We need to know what's happening. So this, they added that, and it was it's a good snapshot basically of the letter I sent to them saying this is what we want to, and I had listed why, but they plugged in at least what they were willing to do. Okay, so PWN evaluation, I'm going to jump to reevaluation just because it kind of flows from this. But reevaluation obviously is after you've gotten an evaluation done and you have an IEP in place, okay? So your reevaluation, we're over here. So reevaluation can be performed at any time. So if you get an evaluation, you had an evaluation last year, or I had a bunch of little COVID kids from the elementary school get their evaluation done by Zoom or whatever, Teams. It's like, how are you supposed to actually know how they function? And so then they have a really bad year this year, and it's not help. They had I mean, they did the best they could, but it was not a helpful IEP, right? And so we asked for a reevaluation way early. Like, it didn't have to be at that 3 years, right? We asked for it way early so we could get it done and improve that IEP to actually make it work for the child when he's in the building with his peers, with teachers. So it has to be done. Here's the annoying part about law, right? It has to be done in 3 years, but it can be done earlier. Also, if it's properly documented, you can waive that 3-year time too. I don't know if I would waive the 3-year thing unless you're like maybe at the March of a senior in high school, and you're just like, what's the point? We're so close to graduating, everything's doing okay. But there needs to be like you would want to make sure everything's properly documented. If you're going to waive. But definitely you can ask for it earlier on just to get the information ahead of time. And if there's been a lot of changes and the child's doing really well, maybe a reevaluation might be helpful. You could also just be aware, though, if you're going to ask for that and the child's doing well, they might try to kick him off the IEP fully. You lose some protections that way, of course, but that is, it's always nice to have updated information to best help your child be successful in school. Okay, so this is just kind of what I talked about. Make sure you document everything. Whatever you're doing for the reevaluation, document it if you're waiving it, document it if you're asking for it early. If they refuse to do it when you ask for it early, they need to give you that PWN, and then you can object and have another meeting and say, this is why we need to do it. Or maybe this is what I said before, I'm going to say it again. If it's completed, it has to be comprehensive again. So sometimes I've had parents that have maybe considered waiving like an IQ test. If they did an IQ test in 5th grade and now they're thinking about doing one, again in 7th or 8th, they're like, I don't really know if we need to have them do extra tests for that. But everything else should be reevaluated. And you really need to look at what you want to see from this evaluation to make sure that it is comprehensive. If they missed anything before, you could ask that be added. Some things that I find nice is that having evaluations done again. So they're redone, so you can see if there's been changes in scores or information that's helpful. And asking for more, sometimes I feel schools don't always do parent interviews or reach out and get that extra information that really could be helpful. So if they don't include that in the PWN, I've had parents and I've worked with parents to write parent input letters to the school and have them plug that letter into the IEP. So that's something that's can be helpful as well, just to make sure that it really is a comprehensive thing and it includes all of the information that you are seeing too. So if you're having an older sibling tutor the student at home, you can put that in a parent letter. It will be documented, and you can make sure that it's part of the IEP. I mean, you have to make the request and follow through, of course, but that's something that can be done. Okay. So if it is a reevaluation and the school is agreeing to do the reevaluation, whether it's early or just at your normal 3 years, they should be sending you that PWN, but you don't need to consent. You can just have it go forward. And then it would happen it would start within that 14-day time frame, but it would start with what they're recommending. So if you disagree with anything in that proposal, if they're missing anything, or if you think that they're going to do a reevaluation early because they're trying to get your child off the IEP, you can object and say, we don't want to do an IEP reevaluation yet. I want to just make sure, we wait a couple more months or whatever. You can put what your reasons are. You can just object and say you don't want to do it. So the evaluation report must, again, be completed within 30 days after they receive the response, or 30 days after that 14-day lapse after you get your PWN. So you get your PWN, you don't send it back with an objection or anything. You don't send it back at all. Then 14 days after that, they can start that reevaluation. And then if you decide to do a reevaluation only based on existing data, like they're just going to do records reviews for everything, the timeline would start after the school district notifies you that they don't want to ask for this, they don't want to do any additional assessments, and that you have the right to ask for assessments. So if you don't ask, then they will just review those records and do the existing data that they already have. Okay, so your evaluation report should include a summary of all of the assessments, all the documents, and information that's tied to that student's disability. It should, if there's any sort of behavioral concerns, and I say behavioral as like a general large word, like if your behavioral is that I'm really anxious and I don't want to go to school, or I get really frustrated and scared, so I run to the bathroom instead of doing homework, or I get really mad at my teacher and so I punched her in the face. Any type of behavioral assessment should be included in that functional behavioral assessment. And if sometimes schools will want to do just solely the functional behavioral assessment, and they call it a standalone functional behavioral assessment. If they recommend that, you can oppose it and say you want a full comprehensive evaluation, or you can agree to just that standalone piece. There is a case, it's federal law, so it's not, it hasn't been litigated here in Minnesota, but there is a case in federal court that's been argued that a functional behavioral assessment is not a comprehensive evaluation, which we agree, I mean, everyone agrees with, but because of that, then any protections or rights to object to the comprehensive evaluation don't apply if you have a standalone functional behavioral assessment. Now, I have heard some schools that are really pushing for this, and some are more flexible on how they want to handle this information. But just so you know, if you agree to a standalone assessment and they come back and they're like, this child really needs a higher level services, they can't be around other kids, or they only need, they need two teachers to one student, whatever, and you disagree with that, the school could point to this other case, in which, everybody's still kind of figuring out how it's going to be litigated in the future. But right now they could point to this other case that's based on the federal law that says you can't ask for a different assessment or another person to do this assessment because it wasn't a comprehensive evaluation. And we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the functional behavioral assessment can be separate or included in everything. And if it is separate, it could possibly impact your rights. So, and I have an FBA handout that I'll send to Jamie so that she can get it out. It just has basically what's required in Minnesota, but it is very helpful because not everybody follows the rule. Okay, so things that might be considered as part of the reevaluation is a change to the child's disability category, qualifies under new or different disability categories. Like my one student, we're arguing with the speech teacher because we think she might have a speech issue, and she's like, she's already getting services. It's like, well, not for speech, you know. That's what the issue is, right? And so, any changes to evaluation, or excuse me, any evaluation changes could lead to changes in service needs, assistive technology. So a reevaluation would start within 14 calendar days after that PW1 is sent to you if you don't send it back with an objection, right? If, again, and I talked about this before, but again, if you have had a lapse since they had special education services in place for the child, whether it's that school or a different school, and it's been 12 months, then it would be an initial evaluation and you have to consent. So I had a case, it was last semester, and the parent thought she had consented, but no one had the PWN. She didn't have the PWN consenting, the school didn't have the PWN consenting, and the child had been off of the IEP for more than 12 months. And so they didn't do the evaluation like the parent thought she had requested and done, and they had all the meetings for, because no one could find this initial evaluation PW1 that was signed that said that she could start it. So if it had been within that time frame, within that 12 months time frame, the school could have just started it without even getting it back. But it was that lapse of time, and then no one could find the document. I don't know where it is, but no one could find it, and so nothing happened. And the parent thought that they were doing a reevaluation when really it was an initial evaluation and it didn't start. Okay, so I'm going to talk about independent educational IEE real quick here, and then we'll take a break and see if there's any questions because I just gave you so much information. Okay, so an independent educational evaluation, or IEE, is not on our flow chart, right? This is the flow chart that I stole from another group because I thought I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but I might have to because it's not on here and it's really crucial. So the IEE can be requested at any point the parent disagrees with a comprehensive evaluation. This is where that sole or standalone FBA piece is going to make a difference here. So if you have a comprehensive evaluation and the parent disagrees, you can ask for an independent. And again, my tip is always document everything in writing. Even if the initial request is not in writing, follow up. Just save yourself a headache later and put everything in writing, in emails, whatnot, just to make sure things are documented for yourself. Okay, so the IEE process is the parent has the right to ask for this separate or private evaluation that the school would pay for. So you would say, basically, you get the comprehensive evaluation back. It's the first evaluation. The parent looks at it and is like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. They missed the fact that my child's hard of hearing, and they forgot to, do an IQ test and all this stuff, right? And so you're like, well, I disagree with this evaluation because you missed a bunch of information. I want an IEE. And then that request would then say basically to the school, you need to pay for a private person to assess my child. And you can pick if you want to have an assessment for a comprehensive assessment for everything, or if you're just going to have them pay for, an IQ test or a hearing test or whatever was missed that you disagree with. Now the school can ask you, why do you disagree? Why do you think our evaluation is so poor? You don't have to tell them. You can just say, I disagree. It doesn't match what I'm seeing. You didn't interview me like you said, and all of this stuff would have been in here, whatever. You don't have to tell them though. So they can ask you, they have the right to ask you, but you don't have to tell them. You can just say, I disagree and I want an IEE. Okay, you've made the request now. And you've done it in writing just to save yourself a headache in the future. Okay, you've made your request for the IEE. The school has to respond, and they have two options. Okay, they can either arrange for the IEE at public expense. They will send you a list of people that they recommend for providers or assessors of different things. It is their list and their recommendation. So it might be good, it might be bad. Just keep that in mind. It is their list, right? But an IEE will be done and paid for by the school, right? They agree. Or if they don't agree, they must file a due process complaint with the Office of Administrative Hearings. And basically you would have like a little court trial with a judge. He's a hearing officer or administrative hearing officer. So it's not like Law and Order where you have to, present all your information to a jury. You talk to the judge and basically you just explain why their evaluation wasn't comprehensive, why it failed to assess certain things. And you could present evidence, you could bring in different evaluators, outside people that have met your child, if you have reports from doctors, things like that. It's a little bit more complex because you need to figure out the court piece of it, but the school has to respond. And I've had cases where the school has just ignored these requests. And when I had cases like that, I did some more research, and there's schools, again, because this is federal law, there's schools in other states that have ignored parents' requests for 5, 6, 20 months. I mean, it's just like it is ignored. And so know that they have to do something. They cannot just not do it. And they might set up another meeting to try to talk about it or figure it out. And maybe they're willing to do a comprehensive evaluation because they messed up the first time. It's up to you on how you want to proceed. Of course, you need to know about your own IEP team and your own child's needs, but they have to do something. And they can't just ignore your fact if you made your request. So, and again, that's why having it in writing is really helpful, because then you can just show the judge, hey, I made the request, 12 months ago, and they didn't do anything about it, and I need to have one in place. So, okay. So, if the school decides to go to the court route, basically that due process complaint, it will be all up to the judge to decide whether or not you get to have an IEP or an IEE paid for by the school. If they say that they don't want to have the school pay for it, if the judge says that, you can still get one, but then it's not gonna be paid for by the school. You can still get one and then present it to the school. Also, this judge can ask for an IEE. So if you go to court and you're like, well, this is my concern, here's what's going on in your first argument, the judge might be like, well, yeah, let's get an IEE and see what happens. And then that would be at the school's expense as well. Okay, so just so you know, though, the parent is only entitled to one IEE at public expense. So every time they conduct an evaluation, you get a chance to you get one. So if you disagree at the comprehensive first initial one, you can ask for one. If they do it again, because they got all this information and then they finally have a comprehensive evaluation, 3 years comes by, they do another one and you disagree again, you can ask again. Now, I'm just gonna go back up real quick. Okay, so you can ask after you have your evaluation here, but as you go along and you see the development, the implementation, you have your reviews, your annual reviews or development, at any point you can ask for an IEE if you start to see that there's a disagreement in what you believe the comprehensive evaluation from the school says and what you think you need. Now, another just side note or tip that I use with my clients, if you ask for a reevaluation, like a reevaluation earlier than that 3-year mark, they could do that and you could have a chance to maybe get 2 bites of the apple, right? So you could try to get that reevaluation done early. Maybe you'll agree with it, and then they'll see all these other things and all your concerns and have the changes to the IEP, which would be great and faster. Or not, and you can at least have one chance to see what they've said, and then if you disagree, then you can ask for that IEE. So having that reevaluation can happen sooner and can give you an opportunity to get 2 bites at the apple or two evaluations done. At least it gives you the opportunity to make multiple requests for evaluations to get your child connected with services as you see fit. So, okay, functional behavioral assessment. We talked about this a little bit, and I have the handout that I'll send to Jamie. But basically, this is depending on the child's disability. It should be done in an initial evaluation. I always recommend, unless it's solely for one very narrow area. I mean, it should be a comprehensive evaluation. So I'm saying this just knowing, like, if you know your child and like this is the concern, it should be really part of a comprehensive evaluation just to make sure that functional behavioral assessment understands how the child's responding in the school. So this is by the Minnesota rule. The FBA should include a description of the problem behaviors and identifications of events and times that can impact or predict when the child's going to have a negative behavior in the school. They're supposed to know triggers, consequences, what reinforcements has helped the child not act in a negative way versus things that have pushed them in a certain way. What's the function of the behavior? And then how they're going to collect data. Now, I have seen a couple functional behavioral assessments early on when I first started, and they were terrible. They did not meet this rule at all. They did not include any sort of hypotheticals or predictors of what was causing any issues. I have now since, it's been a year now, I have seen some that have been very, very well done. And we have some really good information from our people at the schools that have worked really hard to gather information and help the children be successful, because now we know what's causing certain behaviors. So just as a heads up that can be something that's to keep in mind. And now whether this is a standalone FBA or the comprehensive FBA, it should be used to create a positive behavior support plan in the IEP. I've had students with FBAs, the functional behavioral assessments done, and then we still don't have a positive behavior support plan. How are we supposed to help our children be successful if we don't have all that great information collected and put it into a document that lists what their triggers are and how to teach them replacement skills and things that are helpful with getting positive behaviors versus negative behaviors? Now, just as a side note with all my acronyms, positive behavior support plan has been labeled many different things by every single school I work with. So positive behavior support plan, behavior intervention plan, I don't know, there's like a positive behavior intervention supports but it's anything to do with the behavior that FBA should be used to create it. Okay. And that is listed what the sections of an FBA may be labeled as, so that you know it might use different phrasing, of course, but there should be different categories in your FBA that are translated into your positive behavior support plan. All right, so let's just take a moment. I've dumped a lot of information on you. Do we have any questions or topics or things that we should bring up real quick before I go on to my next just bunch of information for folks?
Thank you, Laura. I don't see anything in the chat right now, but we'll just pause and let folks either raise their hand or you can type it in the chat and I will happily read it for you.
A quick question. My child goes to a charter school and they haven't, I think he's at the 3-year mark. They haven't brought up doing an evaluation, and this would be our first evaluation with them. Yeah, have you seen like discrepancies between how a regular public school sort of handles their special education process and then a charter school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I have. So, and I mean, that's not just, I've seen, yeah. I would take the initiative to say we need to start. I don't know if you are in school, I guess, but I would take the initiative to say we need to start talking about this. When does it
Okay.
expire?
Yeah, he's still in school. No, just as you were talking, I was like, I should check the expiration. So will it expire exactly 3 years from the date on it?
Yeah, the date the evaluation was done.
Okay, yeah, I'll go check that because yeah, that just was in my brain as you were talking was I've never seen them mention anything along those lines, and he has a new diagnosis. So it's like I would like that to be added to his IEP and things like that.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Yes, I would just mention it to them and say, now I'm assuming your charter school doesn't go year round. So I would at least mention to them and say that we need to get this planned for next year, like ASAP, whatever your date is. But even just starting out, you probably want to start out September on a good foot and having, get started on that. So there's that. But then the new diagnosis piece, just I've had some schools that have ignored information from doctors. They just don't think that it's helpful or relevant. And so one of the pieces that I have found beneficial, and you can take this or leave it if it's not helpful, but talk to the person that did the diagnosis and just ask for them to just do a summary for the school on what like what the diagnosis looks like, or how it could impact, or maybe both, or how it could impact them at the school, right? So,
Oh, that's a good idea.
and then you can, then it's an educational document that you can just present to the school. So
Okay,
I
yep.
have
Good idea.
a client right now, she's adopted 4 children with FASD, and the school does not understand fetal alcohol syndrome at all, right? At all. And so we've been really working hard so that she's been presenting information all along from the doctors, but that there's, if we can kind, we've plugged in now that I'm working with her, I'm like, just we need to get them to put in some, just even snippets of training information into our letter, so when they read it, they have a, just a,
Mm,
even a snapshot of what this really means, because no one, they don't know, and they haven't done anything, and we're also working to get training added to the IEP itself that's required, but that is something that's just is taking a little bit of time. So now whenever we send anything, not, it's not just what needs to happen, but it's more of why. Like he needs busing because he just gets so distracted that if he ever walked to school, he would never make it there, or whatever, right? Or he would just ride the city bus all day because he just doesn't focus enough to get off, or whatever it is. To add in a little bit piece of that. So that's just my 2 cents there. So.
thank you. Good idea.
Okay, so maybe I'll keep going here. All right, so um, okay. Can you see my screen again?
I see it.
Great. Okay, so we're going to continue on with the IEP process on our flow chart. We'll maybe taking a few detours just to highlight some things here. The IEP development. Your IEP team will develop the IEP based on that comprehensive evaluation, whether it's the school evaluation or your IEE, or your IEP evaluation done by the school with input from your, medical providers, whatnot. It should list strengths of the students, concerns of the parents, results of that evaluation or newest evaluation or more information, academic, developmental, the functional needs of the child. Um, there's so many other things to consider when you write your IEP, right? Parent communication requests. That's a big thing that I've been really pushing with some of my families, because the schools just kind of try to like shut them out at certain aspects. And so we have really plugged in a couple of our IEPs where this has been a big struggle, is when the school is required to communicate with the parent. So it's been really nice. They can be like, look at the IEP. This is our contract with the school, and it says you're supposed to talk to me every Friday on the behaviors of my child. So it can go in a couple of different spots. I've really put it in, like sometimes we'll do it under accommodations, modifications, and supports, because it's really a parent IEP team support thing. Or definitely we'll put it in the parent input letter if we submit that it needs to be done and we request that. The goals and how they're doing data collection can also be a method, just to try to say like, we want to have it here just so it's very clear on the page. It has to come to me once a month on whatever, right? I want to know how they're reading. They're really struggling. You need to send me reports every month. Bullying concerns. This is a thing that we've been working with students as well this year. Whether the student is identified as a bully or the child is a victim of being bullied, we will work with the IEP team to try to develop goals and services support surrounding this to help support them better. Some of it is just like social cues and understanding. Also self-advocacy, like if a child is, not that we want them to be bullied, but if it happens, who can they talk to and what's the process for that? And taking some of that school policy stuff, making it less complex, and then adding it to an IEP that actually can be enforced and pushed and changed to help the child be successful. ESY, um, having your summer school stuff noted, and making sure you're requesting it. I had some schools tell parents, we don't offer ESY for those particular services. Where that's not it. ESY needs to be offered for a student if they have a need. And so having that listed early on in the year before summer comes is good. It also can make it so that the ESY program is well adjusted for where they are, rather than kind of like throwing stuff together at the last minute. I have also had parents that are working on IEPs and they're like, I'm so done with the school. I just need a document so I can take to the next school. And so we won't, if the child looks like they need a ESY, we'll ask for it early on, just to get it in there so they can take that document to the next school and be like, this is the last school said they needed a ESY. Let's talk about how that's going to look like this summer. Transportation needs. Don't ever rely on just the school saying we'll take care of it and not change the IEP. This is your contract. This is your document on how you're going to enforce the school to have them do things. So I had a poor client. She came to me and it's like they school transported her and now they won't. The IEP box was never checked. It was like some sort of agreement she had with prior staff that they're gone and now we have nothing. So it kind of started from all over. Also, there's a couple of cases out there that if they're trying to take away transportation, they really should be doing that reevaluation to say that it's not needed and kind of like a look at the busing and how busing's going and social skills peers and more like unscheduled time, right? And how do they operate? And if they're not doing well, then they really shouldn't be taking away transportation. A huge piece that I've seen missing from all of my IEPs this last year are field trips. What's going to happen? Is a para going to go? Is the child going to have special services? How is medication going to be handled? Some of that stuff is naturally involved in the law, but if it's not in the IEP, people forget and don't do it. And it's not, you can enforce it, but it's just so nice if you just have it in the document. And then attendance. I had a young gal, it's a long story. She had a really terrible year and the school implemented a lot of things that weren't helpful for her. And so she developed some OCD symptoms that negatively impacted her and caused her like just extreme anxiety to be in the school building. And so she didn't want to go. She couldn't go some days. And so we added into the accommodations, modifications, and support section that any attendance tied to her disability will be excused. And that covers us. I mean, the team knows now what's going on and we have it covered, but people are leaving left and right. And so we just don't want to have it left to chance that they're just going to like understand if it's a whole new team next year. Okay, this is IP development. I'm just going to skim over this. There's certain aspects. This is basically IDEA, the federal law idea of what needs to be in your IEP. And it is required that all of these things are in there. IEP implementation now. So this is our fourth box down. Services must be in the IEP to be implemented or to be implemented correctly, right? So if we have agreements or these, let's try this, or it's okay, we don't need to change the IEP, we got your back. You cannot rely on that forever, right? We need to have it in your IEP so that you can point to it when they don't do it. And progress reports should be also shared with you, and that will help you know how IEP implementation is working. Progress reports are really tied to those goals, but if you need progress reports on other things, either consider about making it a goal itself or talk about that updated information and how you're going to gather it from that specific staff member or team member. If you want to know, maybe it's not a goal, but you want to know what sensory tools that the child is using to help them with their autistic needs and sensory needs. Maybe you just ask the OT person, like, can you send me an updated list of what her preferred items are at the school? I'm going to go talk to the doctor this weekend. We just are curious of what she's preferring in the building versus at home. And like I said before, you can ask for those communication things to be listed. And how it frequently is going to happen, how it's going to happen, email, phones, whatever. So again, I would always recommend email just to get it in paper so you're not having a headache later. Okay, so I'm going to talk just briefly about IEP goals. Your goals or your child's goals in the IEP are skills that your child should learn to be successful in school. So the IEP will measure to improvement on these goals, provide progress reports like we talked about. Your first page of your IEP should have what those progress reports will look like and how frequently they're coming out. Not like that it's going to have this certain format, but it should say, it's going to be sent out to the parent by email with the grades once a semester, or it's going to be on a more frequent basis, whatnot. You should have that on your first page and they should be following that. The goal should be set at minimum yearly. That's when you do that IEP development, and they should be changed when needed to help your child to continue to be challenged at school. So goals should be attainable, but also challenging. You don't want simple goals, like you don't need an 8th grader who is, just struggling with, ADHD to learn how to tie his shoes, from 3rd grade to 8th grade, right? It should be like, maybe you work on some functional stuff that's age appropriate to help them get to where they need to be. Once they've met their goal, and if you found out they've met their goal before your yearly review, you should have changes added to that IEP. Your goals are based on your present or your child's present level of academic achievement and functional performance, as well as comprehensive evaluations. The present levels and comprehensive evaluation should identify your child's strength, academic levels, behavioral needs. Okay, so your goal should have the following information. It should be written in a way where the present level is listed, or that functional performance. It should have a measurable goal, like what are we going to do within the next year of this IEP, and benchmarks or short-term objectives. And I've seen benchmarks or short-term objectives written a couple of different ways. Sometimes they're like almost chronology or like step by step. First, we're going to do learn 10 sight words, and then in 3 months we'll learn 20 sight words, and it's like just building up to very limited, like that. But then there's other ones where they're like more of maybe a complex piece to it, where they want your child to learn different letter sounds, and then work on doing different, another objective might be practicing doing like arm pats while they go into their letter sounds. So you also need to have how your progress reports are going to be collected, data is going to be measured, things like that. Okay, so I have a goal here. We're going to talk about it. So my goal has my name, or names a skill or behavior that we're going to learn. So Laura is unable to consistently read CVC words, which is consonant, vowel, consonant words. So like cat, bat, whatnot. Each goal should be challenging but attainable. And you want to think ahead also where you want your child to be in the next year, or where they should be with their peers in the next year. And they should explain how that will be measured and who will be doing the measuring. So by 2024, when given 50 written CVC words, a teacher model decoding strategy, such as the arm pats, that's when like you go at, right? You do your arm pats, or you can do like magnet letters or whatever, right? That's my teacher model strategy. So I know how it's going to be done, right? Like there's a process, that there's a plan in here. Laura will make the sounds for all letters for 50 out of 50 words, as assessed by my special education staff. So the para might be sitting with me while I'm with the general education doing the modeling, or maybe the special education staff is going to be collecting data from the general education teacher, right? We need to, that would be part of the IEP team discussion about how this is going to be done, but this is our goal, right? So then you talk about your benchmarks and short terms. That's how we're going to get to this goal. Like, where we're going to break it down to be incremental or task-based. And then you need to do like for this one would be incremental, right? So the 50 out of 50 words is my year-long goal, but by May I'm going to first do 13 out of 50. So this is just a summary of what should be in your IEP, to help support get to your goals, right? Your least restrictive environment, which is crucial. And is often overlooked because it's kind of muddled down under a bunch of different graphs and whatnot on your IEP, but that is really important that's written well. Accommodations, modifications, and support. What are we going to offer to Laura to help her learn her CVC words? Program support for school personnel. Maybe they need to be trained on my reading disability or speech disability. Our statewide assessment's going to be changed. Do I have a positive behavior support plan? Every time do I do CVC words that I get really mad and I kick the garbage can? Do I need to have something in place that helps me use this extra energy? Maybe I do this challenging work after I do gym, so I'm a little bit worn out. I got the anxiety out of me, and that's how my positive behavior support plan's written. Okay, so how do we know if services, supports, everything's in place to help our child reach their goals? We're going to have our progress reports, right? Okay, so like I said, progress reports should be listed on page 1 of your IEP, and they are required under IDEA, the federal law. So the progress report does not need to match the report card. It can, and sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's not, and you want to know like ahead of time, and they should do it more often. Schools often buck this. I think the progress reports are a little bit of difficulty in getting them together, but we want to know what the information is. And honestly, sometimes I think getting the progress reports at the same time you get the grades, you're like, okay, I see you're failing, and now I get a progress report that says you didn't do well. Like, how is this helping us? But I mean, everybody needs to get the information however it best helps you and helps your child. And getting information ahead of time through your case manager might be a good strategy too. if the school is really pushing back on the progress reports and how it's going to be shared with you. So your progress report should include a summary of the data that's collected over this time frame, what, you know, a semester, a quarter, whatever, to show you how your child's doing on reaching their goals. So if you get a grid on, you know, the child is reaching their goals and here's their, I don't know, last 4 assessments, that shows that we have a trend line of going up. Or if they are collecting data on a daily basis on behaviors and they just have a bunch of tally marks, all of that stuff should be collected on a regular basis. And that's a conversation you'll want to have with your IEP team, is the data collection piece. And we'll go into that in a few minutes here. Now, if you get a progress report and then you ask for the data that supports this report and the school can't give it to you, that's a really big sign that the child is not meeting their goals. Also, your progress report should be targeted to the goal. I've seen progress reports where it's like all about reading, and they're like, well, Laura has a really nice smile. And it's like, that has nothing to do with anything. Good for her. I'm happy my child is smiley, but that doesn't help me know if she can read her words or not, if she can read at her level, if she's even progressing. We don't know that. And the progress reports should be based on something that's like measurable. So having a really nice smile is not really measurable. Like, that's very subjective. But if we have instead maybe some reading goals that are targeted towards assessing how they're doing on standardized testing or regular, you know, special tests that are designed for assessing these but aren't, you know, used over and over again so they don't memorize them, that would be a way to like see how they're progressing. So I have one that we were working on, that little kid, they were working on having them do a good sentence, right? They have capitalization, finger spaces, period, or exclamation point or whatever, right? So there's 5 things that they measured every time she wrote a sentence. Not every time, but every time they measured it. And so that was really nice, because then the parents like, okay, so I know what the goal is here, is to get her to write a sentence with the 5 criteria of having a good sentence. And we knew what those were because they were provided to us. And then when we talked to the school about how she wasn't progressing on this goal, or it was kind of zigzaggy, you know, every day was different, they were able to identify, well, this is the thing. She usually always gets a capital letter and a period, but finger spaces are really hard and everything's kind of smushed together. And some days she does good, but some days she doesn't. And so we were able to actually kind of, as we had this larger goal, we could kind of work from there and make a benchmark. Okay, well, maybe a benchmark is that we need to have some clever ways to work on finger spacing. Maybe we get her like a fancy ruler that is, you know, a little bit more narrow, that can like be there and she can use it, and it's her favorite color, pink or whatever, that we can have this other benchmark to help her get her to her goal. Okay, so going to data collection, the purpose of data collection is to measure progress. We should be collecting data on services and supports that are offering, and it should be individualized. The data collection should be focused on the goals of that student. I don't want to be collecting data on OT sensory items if I don't care on what the student's using. I want to know how she's responding to triggers. Like, you are giving me charts on what document she's, or what OT items she's picking. You know, is it the squeeze ball? Is it the trampoline? Is she going to the sensory breakout room or using noise canceling headphones? I don't care about that. What I need to know is what's causing her behavior to begin with. And if we're not collecting data on that, then we don't know. Now, the behavioral data collection reports, I would really recommend getting those on at least a weekly basis. If you have a child that is getting supports and skills for behavioral data or behavioral need, I would also make sure that your positive behavior support plan really matches that goal that's in your IEP. Okay, so what is data? And actually, I have a handout that I will send to Jamie, or we can talk about this some more later, but they can call it all sorts of things: checklists, student work, survey data, whatever. I've had students that have had data collected, and it's just like workbook sheets, and I'm like, I don't even know when this happened. There's no dates. I don't know what they assessed from this. Like, it's really difficult for me to know. Was it all done on the same day that you sent me like 30 pages, or did it, like, is this over a period of time? I've had survey data where staff have emailed teachers once a quarter and asked how the student is doing with her attention and perseverance on tasks. And it's like, well, that makes me nervous, because only bad days stick out in people's memories. Not only, but often. You know, standard days where someone is just doing their work and not drawing your attention to them? Are they noticing that? Are they noticing that she's persevering? Also, how do you measure perseverance? Like, that's just a weird thing to measure. So your data sheets can look all sorts of ways and be different in forms. It depends on how even your teacher designs it, but that is something you can ask for and ask to see before you start working on collecting data for this next year. Okay, so
Laura, sorry to interrupt. I just want
Yeah.
to let you know we have about 15 minutes left.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
Okay, so your data collection sheet should include what's being collected, how often it's going to be collected, how the information is going to be shared with you. And then I just listed out some ideas of data collection changes depending on what your sheets look like. Okay, so your IEP review, this is one of our last things to touch on here. This must be done every year. The IEP should be updated to reflect the student's current goals, strengths, struggles, and then I also just listed out when an IEP must be in effect. The beginning of the school year, and if you transfer, your IEP must be adopted with comparable services until the new school can do an evaluation. Okay, so I'm going to skip the questions here and I'll just come back to questions once we get to the end here, just to make sure we hit on all the resolution options. So you have an IEP in place, you are mad at the school about certain things, we have different options that you can proceed with. And we'll go through these and I have some links tied in here. But the conciliation conference is something that you can do with the school district. And actually that's something you'll see on the PW1. It must be done within 10 days of your request for a conciliation conference, and the discussion would be tied to whatever your concerns are. I've had some schools, it really depends on your school district. Some schools, they're willing to do anything within 10 days, even if it's just a general IEP meeting. And I've had some schools where they're like, well, it's just a conciliation conference, and so we're only willing to bring, if the parents ask for that, then they're only willing to bring certain things in place, right? Sorry, my cat's attacking me. There we go. Okay, facilitated team meeting. That is a meeting where you'd fill out some paperwork, send it to the Department of Education, and you get someone to sit down and go over your IEP with you page by page. So I just finished, well, we'll see. I finished one hopefully yesterday. It was our second meeting and we spent a total of 9 hours going through an IEP with the whole team and a facilitator that kept us on task and on topic to make sure we could get an IEP that was acceptable to both the school and the parent. Mediation can be done also through the Department of Education for an IEP. You fill out some paperwork. The school has to agree and be willing to mediate. It is a like a third-party neutral person, same with the facilitated, so they can sit down and talk to you about what your concerns are. If it is that you have a lot of issues with the IEP and how it's written, you might want to do a facilitated team meeting. A mediation is like if there's some specific concerns that you just can't get over, like the school wants to move my child to a level 4 and I disagree, that type of stuff. Now we could do a special education complaint or the due process complaint. And I'm going to talk about those in just a second here. So here are some links that are tied into the PowerPoint for you. Just some helpful stuff to go to MDE. The special education complaint, that is if there's a violation of your IEP by the school or the child find law, right? So if the school failed to find your child as in need of services and there's a bunch of red flags and whatnot, you can file for the complaint here. It is a 2-page document and it does not expand. So when I've done these for clients, I just say, I write see attached for my my sections and I just write a letter. That's usually, I don't know, 7 to 10 pages long. You have 1 year to file. So if you file, it will capture that year time frame now. So if you file today, it will capture through June of 2022. Sometimes that's important just to, I guess, depending on what's going on with your child's needs. If you need to go further back and make arguments, you can list them about other things. They might use that as like historical reference, but they won't decide any errors that were beyond a year. The special education due process complaint, that's one where you can file and have a hearing with the judge. Like if you ask for the IEE and the school didn't do anything for 2 years, you can ask for a hearing with the judge and just say like, they didn't do anything. I would like someone to do something. Judge, please order this. The due process complaint also has a disciplinary action path, and that can speed things up However, as a note, I did one of these and they tried to have us go through the expedited option, and it didn't. It's based on school days when you do the expedited path. So I think they have to have a hearing within 30 days but it's school days, and we were out of days. So it would have been, it was faster for us to do the non-expedited route actually, because it was um, filed in at the end of May. Okay, so here's some other options just to keep in mind if there's other concerns that are going on in the school. Maltreatment or neglect of the teacher, staff, somebody has hurt or neglected your child, there's a complaint form for that. Licensing concerns, there's a complaint form for that. Or you can just send in a letter. I had a teacher that my student was being evaluated. He had PTSD and he was actively being evaluated. Like they're finishing up the IEP, and he was having some behaviors in the classroom. The teacher walked him out in the hallway, and the teacher told my client to punch him in the face. And I was like, well, this is just really bizarre. And so we got the records from the behavioral incident, and the teacher documented that he did this. So we worked with the parent on the licensing concerns. There was a letter that went out to the Department of Education. And then we also just sent and attached his notes that he wrote this himself. Licensing concerns, I think, is really limited to only a couple. I think there's like 5 or 6 different things that they'll look into, and it's not the same as maltreatment. So you can do both depending on what happened. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you feel like your child's being discriminated due to race, disability, gender, other protected status, you can file a complaint with the Department of Human Rights. You have 1 year to file and to capture that year time frame. And they just basically assign an investigator, similar to the maltreatment or neglect complaint. They'll just assign an investigator to look into it. Office of Civil Rights with the U.S. Department of Education, so that's like, nationwide. They will also investigate discrimination that's happening in the school, but you have 6 months to file, and that's 6 months from knowing about it. So if you know about it and sit on it, that's when you need to maybe figure out what's the best path. The OCR, or Office of Civil Rights, is a longer process to get feedback from them, but they do different statutes or different federal laws than, because Minnesota Department of Human Rights has its own Minnesota statute to enforce, whereas the U.S. Department of Education has different federal laws. So it kind of depends on your preference, and what happened and when you found out about things and when you went to file. Okay, you can also file a FERPA violation complaint with the U.S. Department of Education. So if you are aware of a staff or someone at the school sharing private information about your child, or FERPA also, this complaint also covers if there's, if you need to change something in your child's records and they're unwilling to change it. Now, I think there's some, things within reason. But if they're just not willing to hear you out, or like if there was an investigation and they didn't interview your child about something and they didn't want to include that, that could be a FERPA violation as well. FERPA, this complaint department with the U.S. Department of Education, they have some really nice YouTube videos on their website that really explain the next steps and how it all looks. And I should add that to the page here. FERPA is actually a 6-month filing deadline as well. And the Minnesota Department of Education has a safe and supportive school violation complaint for bullying. And this would be against the school for not following the statute or school policy, or their policy doesn't match the statute, any of those types of things. There's a technical assistance center that it's very helpful if you call them. They can walk you through different options. You can do a complaint. You need to sign a release of information, obviously, so they can get the file and like look through things. But a lot of the schools, in my experience, have been violating the Safe and Supportive School Act, the law, because they don't, when a student has gone through significant bullying, they're supposed to connect them with community resources, and that doesn't happen, like, ever. There's some other areas of the law that they can violate that's pretty easy, but that community resource piece is huge. Also, as I listed here, and I talked about before, is having your 504 plan or IEP talk about a bullying needs is something just to keep in mind. Okay, 504 plan. 504 plan starts with an evaluation as well. Typically, you just need to have some sort of documentation about a diagnosis, and the school will even start it for you and then do an evaluation as you work. A 504 plan is a really good tool to use also as a bridge between while you're waiting for your evaluation to happen for your student, like for an initial evaluation. This is the same slide as before, just who qualifies. It should be conducted and completed in a timely manner. Again, a 504 is based on civil rights statutes, so it has to do with making school accessible, removing barriers for a child with disabilities. They're supposed to give you like a permission form. It's kind of like a PWN to start the initial evaluation. I don't always see that. I think sometimes they accept the parent's email as an initial or acceptable form. Okay, so a 504 plan is not an IEP, as we know, right? But sometimes having the 504 plan is a really good benefit, right? To bridge as you're waiting for that initial evaluation and IEP to be created, you can have some services and accommodations in place. If you get an evaluation done for an IEP and the school's like, no, they don't qualify, but we can do a 504 plan, that might be an option as well. I would just make sure you agree that they don't qualify, because they might qualify. Sometimes schools don't want to do an IEP because there's a lot of obligations, data collection, progress reports, all the stuff that goes on along with an IEP. 504 plan, it's easier. You just give them extra time on tests or provide some, note-taking services or whatnot. It's a little bit easier on the school. Yeah, so similar to the IEP, it provides supports and accommodations. Unlike the IEP, it does not include goals or objectives. So sometimes if there's something impacting attendance, you can ask for a 504 plan. So basically, it's to make sure that the school's policies, practices, and procedures are acceptable for a student with disability. Okay, and then your dispute resolution options. You can negotiate with the 504 team. You can submit a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights. They investigate that 504 statute. Mediation, you can file a suit for discrimination. If you object to a 504 plan, I've had some schools where they just send it out and there's like no way to object or like discuss it. You can just object, do it in writing again, and then ask for the school to have a meeting. I typed in some helpful links here. Pacer's a great resource. They have a lot. That's where I saw that flow chart from before. And here's our contact information. So we got 2 minutes.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll stay on for as long as we need, but who has questions? And I can talk about other things too if we're beyond sped. So
Thank you so much, Laura, for a thorough presentation. So we'll pause for a second for questions. You can raise your hand or unmute your mic, or you can type in the chat if you'd like me to read it out.
are we good? Did I answer everything?
You covered a lot and you have a lot of knowledge, so I appreciate you sharing it with us. Well, I'll
and we can
put an
stop
additional
recording too.
slide up.
Okay, and we can stop recording if that would make people feel more comfortable. Otherwise,
That's a good
I'll put
point.
my email in the chat and people can just contact me. This week is a little busy with the last week of school, but I'm happy